Corey's bare feet pressed into the sun-scorched earth as he moved with silent precision across the harsh landscape. Every step had to be measured, every sound considered, for the land itself was alive with predators whose presence could be felt long before they were seen. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the distant, guttural cries of giant birds, while the shadows of massive gum trees stretched like skeletal hands across the cracked soil. Corey paused, his hand hovering over the spear strapped to his back, eyes scanning the horizon where a mob of kangaroos grazed cautiously near a dried-up riverbed. His heart pounded not with fear but with the tension of responsibility. His tribe relied on his skill, and today the hunt was crucial. Their food stores had dwindled to near nothing, and every missed opportunity could mean starvation. Beside him, Mira followed with cautious steps. She was younger, perhaps 16, but she had already learned the ways of survival, following her brother's lead with trust and admiration. Their bond had been forged in hardship and loss. Corey remembered the fire that had taken their parents years ago, leaving him with a sense of duty that weighed heavier than any spear. "Keep low," he whispered, his voice barely moving the air. Mira nodded, lowering herself into a crouch, eyes wide but steady, trusting him implicitly. Even now, despite her courage, Corey could feel her heartbeat, small and fast, a fragile drum against a vast, untamed wilderness. A rustle of leaves caught his attention. Corey froze, eyes narrowing. A thylacoleo, a marsupial lion, its bulk barely hidden behind the shadow of a fallen tree, stalked silently, its gaze locked on the grazing kangaroos, muscles coiled with predatory tension. Corey's mind raced one wrong movement, and the predator might change course, turning its hunger toward them. He signaled to Mira, a gentle hand movement urging her to remain still. Their survival depended not only on strength, but on patience, on reading the land as if it were a living map of danger. The hunt began with a sudden, terrifying burst. The thylacoleo lunged, claws scraping earth, teeth bared, and the air filled with a chilling roar that made Mira's knees tremble. Corey leaped into action, spear aimed with precision, a mixture of instinct and learned skill guiding him. He struck the beast's flank, a glancing blow that bought the kangaroos a moment to scatter. The predator yowled in pain, retreating behind the trees, but Corey knew this was only temporary. It would return, hungrier and more cunning. He pulled Mira close, pressing a hand against her shaking shoulder. "It's not over," he murmured, voice calm but firm, a tether of reassurance in a world that offered little mercy. As they made their way back to the tribal camp, Corey's eyes scanned the horizon. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, casting long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. He thought of the others, hunters, gatherers, elders, and the fragility of their existence. One misstep, one wrong glance, and the balance between life and death could shift in an instant. Mira walked silently beside him, but he could feel her tension, the unspoken fear that clung to the air like smoke from a distant fire. He squeezed her hand briefly, a silent promise that he would not let the world take her from him. Night approached, and with it a different kind of terror. The forest seemed to breathe, the distant howls of predators echoing through the trees like a dirge. Corey's ears strained to catch every sound, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of twigs, the whisper of wind that could carry death. He thought of the stories told by the elders, of creatures larger than men, faster than any hunter, and unrelenting in their pursuit. Corey knew these were not just stories. He had seen their eyes in the darkness, felt their breath in the night, and tonight, he felt it closer than ever, a shadow stalking the edges of his consciousness. By the time they reached the camp, the tribe had already begun preparing for nightfall. Fires flickered, casting dancing shadows across faces marked by survival and weariness. Corey handed over the prey he had managed to catch, and the elders nodded, not with praise, but with a quiet acknowledgement of the relief it brought. Mira stayed close, leaning into him for a moment before retreating to her duties. Corey's gaze drifted upward. Stars pricked the sky like distant, indifferent eyes, and he felt the weight of the world pressing down, heavy with the knowledge that the night would be long and perilous. As darkness deepened, a chill ran through the camp. Somewhere far off, a roar echoed, low and hungry. Corey's hand instinctively moved to the spear at his side. The others heard it too. The firelight flickered, shadows stretched, and every face turned toward the darkness with a mixture of fear and understanding. They knew the land was alive with predators that waited patiently, that hunger drove, that spared no one. Corey's heart ached for the tribe, for Mira, for the life they had carved from this merciless land, and he knew, with the certainty that had been honed through loss and instinct, that the night would bring them tests that would demand every ounce of courage, every shred of skill, and perhaps, sacrifices that would leave scars on their hearts forever. The first chapter ended not with resolution, but with anticipation. The wind carried a faint, unnatural sound, one that made the hairs on Corey's neck rise. Somewhere in the darkness, eyes watched, calculating. The nightmare of prehistoric Australia was only beginning, and the land itself seemed to whisper a warning. Survival would come at a price, and no one would escape untouched. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. The night was alive with sounds that made the hair on Corey's arms stand on end. Each crack of a twig, each rustle of leaves, seemed magnified in the darkness. A sinister symphony that spoke of creatures moving just beyond the firelight. The tribe huddled together, eyes wide and ears straining, listening for any hint of movement. Mira stayed close to Corey, her small hand gripping his arm, and for a moment he allowed himself the comfort of her presence. Yet the air itself was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the land was aware of their fear and feeding on it. Corey's mind raced with strategy. The fires were small, enough to ward off smaller predators, but inadequate against the giants that stalked this land. He whispered instructions to a few of the younger hunters, pointing to shadowed areas where the trees grew thick and the grass stood tall. Stay alert, watch the edges, listen to the wind, he murmured, voice low but urgent. The tribe obeyed, their movements quiet but tense, their eyes darting to every dark corner. Every second stretched like a drawn-out shadow, anticipation building to an unbearable pitch. Then it happened. A sound that was not just a rustle, not just a snap, but a low guttural growl that rolled across the ground like distant thunder. Corey's stomach tightened, and he gripped his spear, knuckles white. The thylocolio emerged from the darkness first, its massive shoulders rippling under coarse fur, eyes glowing in the firelight. Behind it, the shapes of other predators appeared, giant monitor lizards, enormous flightless birds, creatures that seemed born of nightmares. They moved with precision, as though the land itself had taught them the patterns of human behavior. Anticipating every step, every breath, chaos erupted. The tribe scattered, screams tearing the night apart as firelight danced on terror-stricken faces. Corey fought his way through the panic, spear striking with practiced accuracy, but there were too many, and the predators too relentless. Mira was ripped from his side by a sudden shadow, her terrified cry cutting through the roar of the attackers. Corey lunged toward her, slashing at a lizard whose claws tore at the earth where she had stood seconds before. He could only catch glimpses her hair, her terrified eyes before she vanished into the darkness, dragged away by a predator that seemed to move faster than thought. Every fiber of Corey's being screamed, yet he forced himself to think, to move with purpose. He protected the remaining tribe members, guiding them toward a narrow ravine that offered temporary safety. One by one they followed, eyes wide with terror, hearts pounding, until only Corey remained near the camp center, facing the chaos alone. The predators circled, testing, waiting, each movement deliberate. Corey's mind worked frantically, calculating angles, escape routes, and the patterns of the attackers. His body was battered, muscles screaming in protest, but his will was ironclad. He would not lose Miranor to this darkness, not to these monsters. Hours passed like minutes. The fires dimmed, smoke curling into the night sky as the predators prowled the outskirts. Corey's every sense was heightened, the scent of the wind, the soft tremor in the earth, the faintest whisper of movement. He moved silently, shadows wrapping around him as he searched, calling out for Mira in whispers, careful not to draw attention. Each reply he received or didn't twisted his gut with fear. Then, a faint, terrified whimper carried on the wind. He froze, listening, heart hammering. It was her, Mira, alive. Corey followed the sound, creeping along a narrow path between jagged rocks and fallen trees. The predators had not noticed yet, their attention divided, hunting with methodical hunger. He found her trapped in a shallow pit, cornered by a massive bird whose wings stretched wider than a man. With a roar that surprised even him, Corey leaped, spear thrusting with all the strength he had, striking true and forcing the creature to retreat. Mira scrambled into his arms, sobbing, shaking, but alive. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, pressing her face to his chest. They made their way back toward the ravine where the rest of the tribe had gathered, but the land was not done with them. Fires flared, ignited by a sudden bolt of lightning from a storm rolling across the plains, and the wind carried the smell of smoke and fear. Corey led the survivors through the chaos, dragging the injured, comforting the terrified, and constantly watching for the unseen eyes that followed them from the shadows. Every step was a battle, every breath a test of endurance. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving scorched earth and broken trees in its wake. The tribe gathered, huddled, exhausted, counting losses and tending to wounds. Kuri's arms ached from fighting, his heart heavier than ever, but Mira was alive, and some of their people had survived. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, to let the warmth of her small hand in his linger. Yet even in that fragile peace, he knew the predators had not gone far. Their world was merciless, and tonight had proven it. As the sun rose, painting the land in pale gold, Kuri stood at the edge of the ravine, looking out across the forest and grasslands. The cries of distant creatures echoed in the wind, a haunting reminder that this land belonged to giants, to beasts, and to death itself. The morning sun burned through a thin veil of mist, casting the prehistoric landscape in harsh, unflinching light. Kuri moved with careful steps, his eyes scanning the horizon where twisted trees and jagged rocks carved shadows into the earth. The tribe had found temporary refuge in a narrow valley, a place where water still trickled from a hidden spring, but the safety was fragile, almost illusory. The land itself seemed to breathe with a predatory patience, reminding him with every gust of wind that death was never far. Mira stayed close, her small hand entwined with his, and he could feel the tremor of her exhaustion and fear. The night had been long, and even the brief reprieve could not erase the memory of predator claws and the cries of the wounded. Kuri's mind churned with strategy, scanning the area for food, water, and potential threats. The valley was a precarious oasis. Giant flightless birds scavenged nearby, their eyes sharp and unblinking, and the occasional rustle in the tall grass hinted at hidden monitor lizards, coiled and patient. Every movement required vigilance, every breath a calculation of risk. He thought of the tribe, fragile and small against the enormity of the land and its predators, and his chest tightened. Survival was no longer about hunting. It was about patience, cunning, and endurance. Hours passed as the tribe gathered resources and tended to the injured. Kuri watched them work, admiration and anxiety warring in his chest. They were resilient, stubborn in the face of terror, yet he knew that the land demanded more than stubbornness, it demanded sacrifice. While others labored, Kuri's gaze drifted to the distant cliffs, where shadows moved unnaturally. A massive figure, larger than any thylacoleo he had seen, prowled with silent grace, testing the boundaries of the valley as though calculating the perfect moment to strike. His grip tightened on his spear. The predator's presence was subtle yet undeniable, a constant reminder that the struggle for life here was unending. Midday brought no relief. The sun scorched the valley, drying the spring slightly, forcing Kuri and the tribe to ration water carefully. Even Mira, normally unshakable, flinched at the thought of thirst, her eyes wide with fear. Kuri knelt beside her, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "We will find more," he murmured, but even as he spoke, he knew it would not be easy. The land yielded its gifts sparingly, and every step toward survival risked awakening another predator, another nightmare. Then, without warning, the ground trembled, subtle at first, like the beat of a distant drum, then stronger, insistent. Trees shuddered as if the earth itself were alive and angry. Kuri's eyes snapped toward the source, a massive monitor lizard, scales glinting in the sun, moved with terrifying speed, and behind it, another figure loomed, a flightless terror bird, wings spread wide, beak snapping. The predators were working in tandem, hunting with intelligence and precision, exploiting every weakness. Kuri shouted warnings, rallying the tribe, but fear had already spread like wildfire. Children screamed, elders froze, and the injured could barely move. Kuri fought with everything he had, spear, striking, throwing, maneuvering, guiding the tribe toward a narrow passage where the predators could not follow. Mira stayed at his side, clinging to him with desperate strength, her sobs cutting through the chaos. One of the tribe's hunters fell, dragged into the tall grass by the lizard, and Kuri's heart twisted in grief and rage. He could not save them all, but he could save the others. He pressed on, pushing through pain, exhaustion, and fear, until the predators finally retreated, perhaps recognizing the futility of attacking in the confined space. The aftermath was grim. The tribe gathered their wounded and mourned the dead, their faces etched with grief, exhaustion, and determination. Kuri held Mira close, whispering words he hoped would comfort, though he knew nothing could erase the fear or the loss. He felt the weight of responsibility more heavily than ever. Their survival depended not only on skill but on endurance, courage, and the willingness to make impossible decisions. Every choice carried consequence. Every hesitation could be fatal. That night, as the tribe huddled together under the stars, Kuri's thoughts were restless. He could still hear the echoes of the day's terror, the snapping of claws, the cries of the wounded, Mira's voice calling for him in the dark. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of life beneath his fingers, and vowed silently that he would not fail again. The land was merciless, the predators relentless, but he would endure. He would endure for his sister, for the tribe, for the fragile spark of humanity that persisted even in the face of a world designed to crush them. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying the distant cries of unseen creatures, a haunting lullaby that promised more danger to come. Corey's eyes scanned the horizon, aware that the day's battles had only strengthened the predator's cunning. Tomorrow would demand more strategy, more courage, more sacrifice. But for now, he allowed himself a fleeting moment of relief, holding Mira close and drawing strength from the knowledge that they had survived. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the shadows shifted, he knew that this prehistoric land, terrifying and magnificent, would continue to test them, shaping their courage and their hearts in ways that would leave scars forever. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. The valley was quiet in the early hours, but Kuri knew better than to trust the silence. The air was thick with tension, as though the land itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash between predator and prey. He moved with Mira at his side, spear in hand, muscles coiled like springs, every sense alert. The tribe had recovered as best they could from the previous attacks, but exhaustion clung to their bodies, and grief weighed heavily on their spirits. Corey's heart ached with the memory of those they had lost, but he had learned that mourning could not come before survival. They had discovered a hidden ledge near the cliffs, a place the predators could not easily reach, where the spring ran deep and the grass was short and dry. It offered temporary safety, a chance to regroup, but Kuri knew that the giants of the land would not rest. The thylacoleo and the other predators were cunning, patient, and relentless. They would strike again, and when they did, there would be no room for hesitation. He gathered the hunters and elders, his voice steady but urgent, giving instructions on how to defend the ledge, how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to protect the children and the wounded. Mira listened silently, her eyes wide, trusting him with a faith that both comforted and terrified him. The first sign of danger came subtly, a shadow moving unnaturally across the cliffside, a flash of teeth, a glint of scales. The predators had learned, adapting to every tactic Kuri had used before. He tightened his grip on his spear, every muscle screaming in anticipation. Then they came, a pack of thylacoleos, their roars echoing through the valley, accompanied by the screeching of the giant flightless birds. The predators attacked with a precision that spoke of intelligence and instinct entwined, forcing the tribe into a desperate dance of survival. Kuri led the defense with a ferocity born of fear and love. Spear met claw, fire met shadow, and every second felt stretched to an eternity. Mira stayed close, helping where she could, but mostly clinging to him, her trust in him absolute. One predator lunged at her, and Kuri threw himself in its path, striking with every ounce of strength he had. The creature fell back, wounded but not defeated, and Kuri knew this was only the beginning. They were fighting not just for the moment, but for the continuation of their lives, their tribe, and the fragile spark of humanity in a world dominated by giants. Hours passed in chaos. The tribe used every skill, every bit of knowledge passed down through generations, to fend off the attackers. Some fell, sacrificed to protect others, and each loss struck Kuri like a spear to the heart. He grieved in fragments, moments snatched between action and strategy, yet he could not allow grief to paralyze him. Mira's hand on his arm reminded him why he fought, why he endured. Each time a predator approached, he felt a surge of determination, a refusal to let the darkness claim them. Then, in the dying light of the afternoon, the largest predator emerged from the shadows of Thylacoleo, greater than any they had faced, its muscles rippling, eyes glowing with hunger and intelligence. Kuri's heart thundered in his chest, fear mingling with resolve. He whispered to Mira, "Stay close. Trust me." The battle that followed was unlike any before. He lured the creature toward a narrow crevice, dodging claws and teeth, using the terrain to his advantage, all while protecting the tribe behind him. The fight was brutal, every strike a test of endurance, every movement a gamble between life and death. Finally, with a combination of cunning and desperation, Kuri drove the Thylacoleo into a trap of his own making. The ground gave way beneath it, and the beast fell with a roar that shook the valley. Silence followed, thick and almost impossible to breathe. The predators were gone, either defeated or retreating, leaving the tribe battered, bloodied, but alive. Kuri sank to his knees, chest heaving, sweat and blood mingling on his skin. Mira collapsed into his arms, tears streaking her face, and he held her close, relief and sorrow washing over him in equal measure. As night fell, the tribe gathered around the surviving fires, tending to the wounded, mourning the dead. and whispering stories of courage and endurance. Kuri sat apart for a moment, staring into the dark horizon where shadows still moved, where the land breathed with the quiet menace of a world that did not forgive weakness. He thought of those who had fallen, the sacrifices made, and the fragile thread by which life hung. Yet he also felt hope, a spark that, despite the terror and loss, humanity persisted. Mira sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder, and for the first time that day he allowed himself to imagine a future where the tribe could survive another day. The wind carried distant cries, a haunting reminder that the world remained dangerous, that predators still lurked beyond the firelight, that the land itself was a living test of endurance. Corey's gaze swept across the valley, his heart heavy but resolute. Survival had come at a cost, and the scars of this night would linger in memory, shaping courage, loyalty, and love. But for now, they were alive, together, and stronger for having faced the darkness. And in the quiet of that prehistoric night under the indifferent stars, Corey made a vow. He would continue to protect Mira, the tribe, and the fragile spark of life in a world that demanded courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding strength of the human heart. The valley settled into uneasy calm, the predators, roars fading into the distance, but the story of survival, of fear, of love, and sacrifice would echo through time, leaving a mark on the land and on those who lived to tell its tale. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the giants of the ancient world waited, patient, relentless, reminding all who dared to live that prehistoric Australia was a land of nightmares, a place where courage and humanity were tested against the raw, merciless power of nature. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel.